Hello, how you doing? This is George and Beth with Jungle Disk. I am the solutions engineer, and Beth is our.
I'm our solution consultant for Jungle Disk.
Yeah. And today we wanted to create this video because there's something that's going to be coming out really soon, and because of the business that we are in and the things that we need to consider for our customers, this is something that we wanted to talk about, which is the GDPR.
Yes.
Right? So this is something that's new. Some of it may sound like common sense. Some of it may be stuff that you're already practicing. So we wanted to talk about it, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, and how it's going to affect your business. Where does Jungle Disk come into play, and some of the things that we can do to kind of help you meet those requirements.
Exactly. So the new regulation, you've probably heard at this point, at some point or another, you clicked on this link, you've heard about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. It was approved on April 14th, 2016 by the European Parliament and the Council of Europe. So it'll be applied directly in each country, EU or non-EU. So, one of the first things I thought of when I saw the EU GDPR, when I didn't know anything about it, I thought, okay, it says EU. I'm not in the EU. It's not going to affect me.
Common misconception.
Common misconception. And I think a lot of us are smart enough to know now, since we keep hearing about it and it keeps coming up. Microsoft has done some webinars. I think I've seen other vendors do webinars. And I think a lot of us understand that it's going to affect the US in some form or fashion, or maybe you're in Canada, it's going to affect you. Essentially, if you're anywhere in the globe, it's going to affect you if you do business with or in the EU. And so we'll talk more specifically about that in a moment. But we have some really good information we can share with you about the enforcement and how it's going to harmonize the policies around the rights of people's personal information and how it's handled.
Right, and again, this isn't coming out till May 25th of next year, but it is important to start discussing it. This is what things that you can implement and put in place to make sure that you're compliant when that does come.
Exactly, like we're in a countdown now. If you go to the EU, the official EU GDPR website, they have a countdown clock.
Yes.
Which I love. It's kind of frightening because, every time I get on there, we're closer and closer to that date. And so it's really important that you're more and more mindful of this stuff.
And it's going to fly.
It is. If you don't do it before the holidays hit and you don't start really focusing on it, this isn't something you want to procrastinate on, because as we'll show you in this presentation, a lot of these things need to be implemented now so that you're already in compliance when it's going to be implemented.
Yes, exactly. And again, with your whole whirlwind of your business and things like that, want to make sure that this is something that you either know about or start implementing, like you said.
Exactly. There was already a directive in place in the EU. So this isn't the first time the EU has implemented something across Europe and how it's handled. But there were some key changes that occurred when they instilled this. And really, it increased territorial scope. And so what we mean by that is, like, now it's not just a European mandate. Now it's something that does affect the globe. We'll go in these changes with each slide that we cover. So if there's anything that you want to focus on, we're more than happy to address any questions after you review this. You can just reply to the email that you got, and we're happy to answer those questions. But there are essentially penalties that have changed. They've gotten more stringent. Consent has changed, and some parameters around consent. And then really where we've seen some expansion in the legislation is data subject rights and how empowered people are in terms of how their data is handled. So we'll go into that.
Definitely. All right. So going into that first bullet point, which is the increased territorial scope, this like you mentioned, this is going to be for anyone that deals or interacts with the EU at all, really. When you're taking any type of transactions, you have business going on, anything that you collect data-wise from anyone in the EU, you're going to be affected, right?
It was previously, in the original directive, it was pretty ambiguous, and it referred to data process in context of an establishment. And that topic has created a lot of really high profile cases in the EU that are, some of which are still going on. And what this does is it makes it really cut and dry in terms of what the scope is and who it covers. And I think, the big points to draw home are that it's regardless of your location, like George just said, and then that it applies in the processing of personal data as well. So there are controllers and there are processors in terms of the scope. And so when we define who a processor is, or versus a controller, for example, a bank collects data. The bank would be the controller, and then the data of that bank's clients, when they open an account, but it's in another location, that would be the processor. The processor would be who's storing the information, who's digitizing the information, who's cataloging the information. All of that falls on the processor. And now, so this mandate isn't just falling on the controllers. It's not just falling on the bank itself. It's also falling on any entity that bank is storing that data with. So Jungle Disk falls in that category. We store all the data. We can't access it. All that data is encrypted. We can't see it. We can't touch it. But we handle it, and it is processed using our tool. And so that's where that expansion of the mandate has increased. And if you, for example, if you're like a CRM and you handle customers' information, some of your customers are in the EU, this is directly going to affect you. Right. And so this is where, folks in different countries are now having to take a step back. Hey, I created some sort of software, or maybe I do e-commerce. And there's data that using my platforms that's being stored, and it's personal information of people that are in the EU, this is going to affect you. And so that's what we really want to drive home here.
All right. Now some of the penalties, right?
Fun stuff.
So this is one of the things that may have changed, right? Because it got more severe, just because of how serious they are with this. So you can see here on the slide, under the new GDPR, you can be fined up to 4% of your annual global turnover, or 20 million euro, whichever is greater.
Whatever is more.
So whichever one's going to cost more is what they'll penalize. So that's how serious this is, and it's something you definitely want to consider in working with people or people's data in the EU. All right. So there is a tiered approach, as it mentions here, for the fines, depending on the severity of the data of the ththings that you weren't meeting, the things that you weren't compliant with, which we are going to go over a little bit more as well.
Yeah. So for example, the example we cite here is a company can be fined 2% for not having the records in order, or not notifying the supervising authority. There's going to be an approach. Yes, it's good. These are stringent fines, but they've gone through and they've said, okay, this particular violation is not as bad as this other violation, and so as a result, that makes it a little more fair. It also makes it definitely more tangible for people. They kind of understand it, solidifies it a bit more than being a bit ambiguous. Like, we're going to get you if you violate it, but you don't really know what the penalty is actually going to be. And just saying up to this amount isn't enough for people a lot of the time. You really need to take it out and show people exactly, what are the repercussions specifically. And so there are details on the website if you're curious.
Definitely. All right. Consent. So this is one of the things that's changing if you're not already doing it, which is the consent must be given in an intangible and easy accessible form to the customers that request it, right? So consent must be clear and distinguishable from other matters, and provide an intelligible and easy accessible form, plain language, something that's readable, so this is where some of the stuff that we offer can kind of help, which we'll go over later, but just letting you know that this is something that if you're not already doing or didn't know, is going to be in place effective May next year. Did I miss anything on that one?
I think you got it.
Yeah, it's pretty Consent's kind of easy.
cut and dry.
Now the data subject rights. This is
Yeah, there are quite a few changes to this one.
yeah, there are quite a few changes.
So since the last directive, data subjects' rights have increased. So data subjects, the people whose data businesses are doing, so me, you, if you're in the EU and you're a citizen, these are your rights. You now have more rights, and you are now more empowered with regard to your personally identifiable information.
And you as a business owner definitely want to make sure that you're aware of this, because this is stuff that somebody's going to want to request or things like that, you know. And so, but before we get into that one, you know, the first one is kind of on you as far as the breach notification. So you can see here that it does mention, you know, within 72 hours, your customers do need to be notified of a breach, you know, what is entailed in it, you know, all the stuff that could be you know, out there, you know, if there was a breach.
Exactly. In the United States, it's kind of funny. All the states have, you know, we have HIPAA, but all the states are required in different ways to handle data breaches and how quickly you respond to data breaches and how you disclose that information and who you disclose it to, and all of that varies. The EU has just united that with all of the countries in the EU. So now there are specific measures you have to take in order to notify when there has been a data breach. And, you know, data breach can come in all different forms, right? There can be a breach of data where, you know, the information is stolen. So, for example, someone, you know, places some sort of technology and retrieves credit card information somehow within your office. From that physically all the way up to the more common way now, which is, you know, malicious actors or agents who are trying to, you know, get into your technology and through the web access information. That's the space that we play in Jungle Disc. That's how we're trying to help defend your data from getting breached. And we'll talk, like George said, later about what specifically technically we can help you with. But you need to know that, you know, if there is a data breach and you discover and you're aware of that data breach, from the moment you become aware of it, you have to, within 72 hours, disclose that to the subject if that data is in the EU. Even if it's not in the EU and it's housed in the United States, if it's an EU citizen, they need to know that their data has been accessed.
Yeah, definitely. And again, like Beth mentioned, this is something Jungle Disc can definitely help with. We're going to talk about the products that we have that can tailor around that. But we just wanted to show you a little bit about the GDPR. So again, this is just a small section of the GDPR. The actual document is pages and pages and pages long. So this is just more of the technical aspect.
We wanted to pull the really important pieces, and especially that we can help with.
Exactly. So right to access, this is something we kind of touched base on with the consent piece. The data subjects, the right for data subjects to obtain from the data controller confirmation as to whether or not personal data concerning them is being processed and for what purpose. So if a customer wants to know what are you using the data for, you got to be able to provide that to them. You can give you have to be able to give a copy of their personal data to them. And you know, this is something that's, like you mentioned earlier, this is something that's changed to empower customers a lot more. Right?
Absolutely. It's in the spirit of data transparency. And so you should always be able to retrieve your data, and it needs to be in a format that's, you know, that's easy to read and is quick and is free of charge specifically. And so you have a right to access your data. If you're an EU citizen, you can get your data from whatever vendors are handling your personal information.
And you being the business owner, you got to be able to provide that. Right to be forgotten.
Yeah, and so that falls right in line with the right to be forgotten. So you have the right to access your information. You also have the right to have that data erased from any vendor's records who may have your data. I was looking at right to be forgotten. I wish that I had the right to be forgotten, not just with my vendors, but just in general. There are people I wish you just forget I existed. But
I told her that, you know, I've already been that.
For other people.
For other people.
You've been forgotten.
I've been forgotten.
They gave you that right.
Yeah.
This is known also, though, officially, you know, all jokes aside, as data erasure or erasure. as they would say in Europe. And so the right to be forgotten entitles the data subject to have the data controller erase his or her personal data, cease further dissemination of that data, and then potentially have third parties halt processing of that data. So that's pretty powerful, because it's not just, it's not just a simple, oh, I'm going to delete your record. We're good. You're done. Look, it's deleted. It's a matter of, okay, any entity, if I'm a doctor, for example, any entity that maybe I sent your personal information out to because we needed to run tests, or we needed to get it processed in some way for us to be able to do our jobs, that data, wherever that was stored, also needs to be erased. You need to provide proof that it was erased as well. And so any EU citizen can do that and can request that of you as the vendor if you're dealing with their personal information. So, so that's just really interesting. And I found that this specifically, this right to be forgotten, is something that I haven't seen addressed in a lot of other compliance measures being in the States. That's in and of itself a right. It's not just a right to access, but a right to just completely not have that record exist. So the ability to delete, that's really important here.
So as important as it is to have backups of your data in case of an emergency or disaster and things like that, it's now important to be able to easily
get rid of it
and give them copies if they need it. Data portability along those lines. Data portability, just as it sounds, you got to be able to, if a customer wanted to obtain the data, you got to be able to give it to them so that way they can move it over to another vendor, and it has to be something that's easily readable, of course. It can't be a bunch of code and stuff like that. It's got to be something that they can understand.
You can't hoard all your customers' data forever and refuse to give it to them because it's your technology that they're using, or it's your service that they're using, and now they can't use anyone else's. This is the right for people to say, nope, you can give it back to me, and I can give those records of the information that you gave me or the service you provided me, and I can now transfer them elsewhere.
Exactly. All right. Privacy by design.
So this concept has existed for many, many years, but it's only just becoming something that's legal in GDPR. So I'm going to read specifically what it states as far as privacy by design. The controller shall implement appropriate technical and organizational measures in an effective way in order to meet the requirements of the regulation and protect the rights of the data subject. So, so essentially, this falls into, and HIPAA addresses this if you're familiar with HIPAA. You shouldn't be giving information or personal information that has nothing to do with the service you provide to a vendor that you may use that may not require it. So let me give you an example. I am going to get my appendix taken out. And so we're going to have an anesthesiologist come and I have to use the anesthesiologist. If in those records they're also providing information that has nothing to do with the services that he is going to provide, he or she, then that's in breach of privacy by design. You only need to provide the information to your processor that has to do with the service that they're providing, okay? Or the service that you're providing. It shouldn't be anything more. It needs to be, it needs to address what you need addressed in order to complete the job that you've been hired to do, but nothing more. They don't need to know, a lot of things that probably are in your records, in your health records. But there are some things that do apply to what they do. And so this is protecting your data as an EU citizen from having disclosed information that does not have anything to do with the service that you're being provided. So I hope that's not too confusing, but that's what it addresses.
Yeah. And again, all of this is stuff that we got to be mindful of, and it can be a lot to deal with. So that kind of gets to the next slide of talking about data protection officers. So HIPAA has something similar to this, to where you want to have I can't remember the term that HIPAA uses, but like a HIPAA protection officer, to where they deal with all that. it's the same thing in this aspect. You know, you want to have somebody in place that's able to do all this stuff. And as long as it's not like a conflict of interest. So some of the things here, currently controllers are required to notify their data processing activities with local DPAs, which for multinationals can be bureaucratic nightmare with most member states having different notification requirements. So, you know, this is a good example of why you would want a DPO, a data protection officer.
Exactly. You need a point person for this, and this is something that was also changed to HIPAA, and HIPAA requires this as well. So if you're already in healthcare, you've seen this, you've encountered this before, but this is making it official for all businesses. There needs to be somebody that's appointed as, you know, it's their responsibility within your company. Now, they're not saying you have to hire a completely different person to be this person. It may be in your best interest to, just depending on the type of industry you're in. You may want to have a person where their whole job is compliance and making sure they're abiding by, you know, GDPR and a host of other compliance measures you may have to live up to. But you may be able to have your HR person be the DPO. It just depends on your company, and that's going to vary. There may be an industry. I mean, maybe I'm giving an idea out to people, but this may be an area that you can outsource, and you can have, there will be DPOs out there that you can for hire. I bet you they exist right now, where their whole job, you can outsource and pay them monthly, and they come in and they do audits and they make sure you're complying by GDPR. Those probably exist, and you can seek them out. But this is saying you got to find somebody. If you're not going to have one in your office, you need to outsource it. You just need to find someone who's going to be mindful in the context of your business, so that you're making sure you're abiding by all of these things, and you can hold someone accountable for ensuring that your business as a whole is complying. There are requirements to the DPO. So they have to be appointed on the basis of professional qualities. So they've got to have some expert knowledge in data protection law and practices. So if they don't already know this stuff, you need to make sure you give them the resources to be able to get knowledgeable or have expert level knowledge. There are plenty of seminars and webinars out there and conferences you can go to make sure people can prove that they have a firm understanding, or you can outsource it. But they've got to be knowledgeable in this area. It can't be somebody random. You're picking just a random person in your office to do this, and they have little to no knowledge of it. They need to know what it is and at least have the competence to be able to learn what it is so that they can do this for you. And again, you have until, what was it, May to do
May next year.
And that's essentially it. And they have to report directly to the highest level of management.
Right. So that way there's no conflicting interests involved or that could possibly be involved, which is the next one, you know.
No conflict of
interest.
Yeah, that's that, like,
DPO.
Jungle Biz doesn't want me as a solution consultant or a person who's responsible for bringing in business to be the compliance specialist, because I'm probably going to be in direct conflict with me trying to grow the business, right? So you're going to want somebody who works in the realm of HR, where you know, this is something where, you know, they're not going to see themselves being willfully neglectful of GDPR.
Cool. So that's a lot of information we know, and that's just, again, a small piece of the GDPR. But we wanted to tailor this to some things to consider, and, you know, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. But we also did want to let you know some of the things that Jungle Disc can do to help, you know, meet this new requirement that's going to be happening in about 6-7 months from when we're filming this. So yeah, so we can definitely help you out. If you're a current customer, more than likely you're already using our backups. You know, that's
Good job.
That's awesome.
You're doing it already.
You are doing it already.
Some of it.
And then you can use that service for when customers request their information. You can always do restores. If they want to be forgotten, you can always go back and purge data from those disks and things like that. So we can definitely help in that aspect of helping protect your business and also help meeting these requirements.
Yeah, it'll definitely keep you protected also from people hacking and getting into your disk, because it's all encrypted.
Exactly.
So it won't even make any sense. And I think you were going to talk about
the network threat protection.
Exactly.
That's the other piece to kind of help out with as far as when we talked about customers being breached, this is a product that we offer that can help you prevent that from even happening, right? Or if it does happen, to kind of contain it. That's another thing that this network threat protection does.
Yeah. Reporting those breach attempts is really, really
and
crucial.
And that's something that this also does. I'm glad you mentioned that. You can run reports on whatever you want, so that way you can see these things, that are trying to come into your network and things like that. So really great. Mm-hmm. And the last thing, we have a couple more products, but email archiving is something that can also help. Using that warm technology, the write once, read many. This keeps track of all your email incoming and outgoing traffic. And if somebody were to request, like Beth mentioned, all the interactions that you had with them, that's some of the data that you have. You can always do a search, and then in this tool you can do exports, you can add users, you can make them. There's tons of things that you can do with this product, mm-hmm. And again, that's something that you can have implemented with Office 365 or Google G Suite, if you're currently using that to make sure that you're compliant.
Complements it very well. And actually, if I may say so, George does an excellent, one heck of a demo for all of these. He can do backups, he can do a demo for network threat protection, he can do demos for Office 365, G Suite, email archiving, all of that.
All our services.
He's an expert and he's a solution engineer, so that's what he does. He can talk tech all day long, and he can show you how to use all these products with ease, and provide some really good tips.
Yeah, so definitely make sure you reach out to us so we can schedule that, a time frame that works best for you and us, so that way we can, bring any of these to light, or if you have any questions on it, or just want to see our products, and how it can help.
Yeah.
And the way you would do that is, you can see here on the screen, you can contact Beth or myself, George. We have our phone numbers there, and we have our emails. Emails is probably the best way to get with us, because we're always on calls and in and out of meetings, things like that. So email would probably be better. So make sure to hit us up, let us know, and we'll definitely work with you.
Yeah, you can also get to us at sales@jungledisc.com. I put a lot of stuff in those slides. Like, you saw how heavy those slides are. Sorry, I'm not like a marketing person, wasn't able to really make it look succinct. But we want to make sure that you have access to the information. If you don't, we pulled this information directly from the GDPR website to make sure that everything, is absolutely what that website said and what the directive is. But if you want these slides, because maybe you want to share this with someone, or you yourself want to take a webinar and do it yourself, I'm happy to share. I'm not greedy. I can share these slides with you. Just let me know where you want them sent, and we can package these up and send them to you, so you can refer back to them and give them to whoever you need to, maybe your DPO.
Yeah. Right. All right. So, we want to thank you for being able to watch this video. We hope it helps. And again, please make sure to reach out to us if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Also, make sure to visit jungledisc.com for even more ways on how to help keep your business protected.
Yes, and if you're curious, you don't want to go in and watch this to see what website the EU GDPR is on. It's really simple. It's www.eugdpr.org. To actually look at the regulation, you can do /the-regulation, and that'll take you to the regulation itself. But like I said, on the main webpage, it'll have that countdown. So don't get too stressed, because you watch this, now you know what to do.
All right. So,
thank you for your time.
All right. Let us know if you have any questions, and see you all next time.